Welcome back to Rewiring Health. So excited to be joined by Ali Damron. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love it.
Yeah, so we were just connecting and we've kind of connected, just following each other, and we have a very similar mindset on a lot of things. And I want to just dive into things and just talk about where this all came from and how our journeys have really brought us to where we are today. So do you
Yeah.
mind sharing what inspires you to do what you do today and the people that you help today?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of intersection between a lot of different parts of my life, actually. I grew up in Western Nebraska where holistic health specifically was not a thing. Never discussed any sort of like natural approach, lifestyle factors, those types of things. And I watched quite a few family members go through some pretty traumatic health stuff. My dad passed away of cancer when he was 44. And from there, I watched a few other things and I always just had this in the back of my mind. Like, I wonder if there's like something that could prevent some of these things or like some other options or avenues. And, specifically with like exercise and nutrition and things like that. I was in college and I became a personal trainer and I worked in lots and lots of different settings with that. And people came with like real stuff, right? And stuff that I felt really kind of unequipped to deal with. I knew, how to tell people to eat healthy and exercise, but not much more than that. And so I wanted to know more and be able to help people a little bit deeper, simultaneously, obviously dealing with the trauma of my dad's passing and lots of other trauma around that same amount of time. I started developing a lot of anxiety. I was already wired as, to your point, a perfectionist, people pleaser. Like I had all the stage was set. And then I went through that whole thing. And so like that kind of just intersected with wanting to do some holistic health stuff. I saw an acupuncturist and just was open to an entire new form of medicine. Like they listened and they asked questions and I felt heard and validated, and something that I had not really experienced in my life. And so that sort of pursued me or helped me pursue a career as an acupuncturist and go to Chinese medicine school. And so I did that. And simultaneously, when I was there, I developed chronic back pain and tried all the things. And, along the way, you start to develop patterns after about 5 years and realizing that it probably was some stress. But I still felt very, disempowered and like, how do I manage my stress to get rid of this pain? And so I found a book called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno, who talks about TMS and different things. And that was really, really helpful. And then I also had a baby around the same time and realized like the lack of help for women's healthcare. And so I think through all of those different intersections, I just became very interested in helping women thrive. I feel like women just are not given the tools. We're gaslighted a lot. We just have no idea. We don't know what's normal, what's not normal. We don't know what to do about it. There's so many issues around it. And I just feel like, women from teenage girls all the way through postmenopausal women are just very disempowered about their health and don't know anything about it truly. And so I just really became, I guess, empowered and like really wanted to help women there. And then, like I said, in the background, I was also going through my own journey of healing trauma, working on my own perfectionism, and like just layers upon layers upon layers kept opening up. And here we are today where they are all merged together in terms of hormones, chronic pain, mindset, nervous system regulation, all of it just coming full circle. So that's kind of where I'm at today.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And like when you speak about women and just like feeling disempowered and gaslighted, it's like you're so right. There's so much, and same thing. My experience with baby, it's like there's no healthcare. It's like you go through this traumatic thing, mentally, physically,
Yes.
emotionally, and you're like thrown out and like, hey, figure it out. And
I
it's like that,
know.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was actually in shock after having a baby with my first child. Like I had been a
yeah.
nanny for 6 children before for a
Mhm.
long time. Like I was around kids a lot. I worked in daycares and stuff in high school and college. And so I felt equipped to do this, but I didn't understand. I read all the books. I really knew a lot in theory, but like the actual experience of going through it yourself was like the biggest medical thing I probably had been through. I got my appendix out once, but like it was really traumatic. And I had a really nice birth too. Like it wasn't a traumatic birth at all, but like just like the level of fatigue and like pain and not understanding what is going on with your body. And then just being like, hey, you have this newborn to take care of that is incredibly needy, and your needs are kind of out the door now.
Yeah.
And it just felt like really shocking actually to me still to this day. And so I absolutely love actually to support postpartum moms and be like, I hear you, what you're feeling is normal or not. Like, let's get some help with this. Because no one knows. A lot of moms experience this shame and guilt and like grief and all of this stuff. And like, you're like, this is what a really bad mom would feel like. Like, what is wrong with me? But I think
Yeah.
everyone has the same thoughts.
100%. No, you're 100% right. I can totally resonate with what you're saying because I went through many of the same things, like had a good birth, healthy birth, but it's same thing. It's like your body's going through all these transformations. You have these hormonal spikes where you're trying to figure out like who you are, how you feel, why your emotions are all over the place. You're responsible for a human life, which like, I mean, there's so many things. And like you said, the guilt and shame, they pile up because you're like, oh, this shouldn't be like this, because if you don't realize that these are all normal to experience, but there's support that's available for this, like you feel
Totally.
very alone. Like even if you have the support system, you feel alone and it compounds it and just makes it so much worse.
I
Yeah.
know. I just feel like women like quite literally like need their hand held by
Mhm.
experienced moms and be like, hey, this is normal. This is fine. It's okay to feel like a hot mess. We got you. Like, you'll get
Yeah.
through this. We're here to help. Like, just feel like women in general need that message.
100%. Absolutely. And just to recognize that like you're not alone. So many women go through this and it's like, especially if you're having a birth that wasn't as,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
normal, quote normal, it's like you can really go through quite a process with that. And it
Yeah.
really needs to be vocalized much more that like what the experience is and how you can seek out help and realize that it's okay to seek out help in those situations.
Absolutely.
Were you experiencing the back pain too at this time when you were going through
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
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 Mm.
All of it. I had like kind of gotten a little bit better. I'm trying to think. It was like all mixed in between acupuncture school, which I had so much perfection with that. I was like, I'm going to be like the valedictorian here. I'm going to be perfect at this. I'm going to be this trainer. I was getting engaged and getting married. So I was like, I'm going to be this perfect wife, like all these thoughts. And so the back pain happened then. I finished school, had back pain. It actually got better when I was pregnant and then came back postpartum for a couple more years after that too, until I
Yeah.
found that book.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've read the book and it's such a good book because it just gives you a whole different perspective because
Like I read myself on
yeah.
every single page. I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, and it just again validates you. It's amazing what a book can do for you when you're reading that you're like, "Oh my gosh, if somebody wrote a book about this, I'm clearly not alone in this,"
Right. Yeah,
and yeah, it's so ironic because like this information is not widely known. It's still shocking to people that like their back pain has deeper causes than just, a mechanical thing. And I think that's the unfortunate thing that it's not widely known that there's so many more causes to things that are going on in our bodies. And can you dive into when you had that realization, how did you start to help yourself get
absolutely.
through that, realizing that there was a lot going on beneath the surface that was causing these symptoms you were experiencing?
So I think you may have heard of this, but I actually had like a book cure. So
Mhm.
where you read the book and basically what happens is like the pain's coming from so much fear, right?
Yeah.
Like fear of the pain itself, but fear in
Yeah.
your external life too.
Mhm.
And so once I read that book, like the fear response was dialed down so much, like I am actually okay. There's nothing wrong. People have healed from this. And there is, to your point, like a doctor writing about this who's an orthopedic surgeon. So he knows what he's talking about. And so I actually did experience a book here. And then I came back and forth and ebbed and flowed for a while longer. And I think eventually I actually sought out a TMS therapist to help me through it. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
So I basically, just like I said, a lot of it is dialing down the fear response. So I kind of gave the pain the silent treatment. And I think there's a lot of strategies here. So I think you can kind of give it the silent treatment. I think you can sort of like, if you can, like ask it like questions and kind of a little bit more esoteric. There's other people who like cuss at their pain and are like, no, we're not doing this anymore. I come at it from a more like neutral response of like, let's not get overly emotional either way. Cause I think it's like really hard to like invite pain in. And like, I just think that's hard for a lot of people. So I gave mine the silent treatment. And every time that I kind of thought about it, I kind of like switched to the emotional side of things. Okay, like what's going on here? What's the overall theme? And I think that can be hard because sometimes, especially after 5 years, like it's really just conditioned at that point. It is like, if I ran, I got pain. If I deadlifted, like those were two huge things in certain sleeping positions. And so after a while, it really does just get conditioned. And so I had to like kind of break some of that conditioning. But the overall theme of my life was the perfectionism, the people pleasing. Obviously, I was a new mom, and I can distinctly remember when I had my first son, like being like, you need to make all the perfect decisions. Like we need to have this perfect birth, delayed cord clamping, like breastfeeding, you know, exclusively. What's the first foods going to be? What are we doing about vaccines? Like there is so much fear mongering for new moms, and fear is truly, truly what feeds symptoms. All symptoms, like from head to toe symptoms. And so I just think that like I had to start, you know, I obviously talked to the TMS therapist at first about the pain, but it layers upon layers was like the fear of my life, like scared I was going to kill my kid or not be a perfect mom or like fail at my business, or there was just a lot of fear in general.
Yeah. Oh
That
my
I had
gosh.
to work through.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so, I mean, I can relate. I'm sure anyone who's listening is like, yes, like that's just, I feel like it comes almost naturally, like when you're a mom, because it is like it's all new and you're responsible for something so big. And then it's like you're seeing your body completely change, and it's a lot. You're not sleeping, so things become exacerbated. Your
I,
eating patterns change. You're like, and then you're worried about producing enough milk, or you know, if you're breastfeeding, like it's a mind game, and then you can get very like warped into that. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
And then you want like your body back, and then like your
yeah.
intimacy with your husband and your relationship shouldn't change. Like there's so many layers. And that was just
Yeah.
like that one experience. But I do think that as a theme, people who are just more our personalities with a lot more perfection, people pleasing, type A, high productivity, like more, I've always been like a little bit more high, I guess like tight wired, or just a little bit more
Yeah.
anxious worrier type of a kid. And so I just think that like all of that set the stage, and like that stuff, I just like to think about it as like a reservoir, all of your like capital T traumas and
Yeah.
lowercase t traumas, and like all of those things just pile in, and eventually it just can't handle it anymore. It's like
Yeah.
we have way too much going on here. Your brain's super freaked out. It needs a distraction. And so it's like, quick, give her a symptom. And so
Yeah.
one day I was at work as a personal trainer, and I was picking up a 10-pound weight. I was in like the best shape of my life. Definitely did not have a weak core at that point.
Yeah.
That's a thing. And my back just went out.
Mhm.
I was training for a marathon, and I really wanted to run this marathon. It was like going to be my fifth one, and quit running. It like did its job as a distraction and exactly what it needed to do.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because it literally is. It's like if we ignore our what our brains and our emotions and everything is saying long enough, it's going to yell, and it's going to continue to yell louder until we honor it. And then it often does comes out in those physical symptoms, because it's like, well, if you're not going to slow down for me, I'm going to make you slow
Yeah,
down.
we're going to
And
give you something to think about. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So when you had all that, and how did you, because I know, you know, we kind of diving into like more of the hormone part of it. Can you talk about more of like the stress response and hormones, and how that all plays a role in the pain response that you experience too, or pain or lack of sleep, or all those things that compile in your life?
Yeah. So one thing that sort of like both worlds collided was when, so in hormone health, I basically tell my patients to start with thinking about it as a pyramid. So at the bottom of that pyramid is going to be your cortisol, which is your stress response, also your circadian rhythm or sleep wake cycle. The second one is adrenaline, which is that fight, flight, freeze response. And the third one is going to be blood sugar. All of them impact, or those three things impact everything up the chain. So we think about hormones as like periods or fertility or menopause and like our estrogen or progesterone. But when we talk about hormones, there's like hundreds of hormones that we're still even discovering daily or regularly. And so we're not just talking about like those three sex hormones. There's a ton of other ones. And the first ones I like to talk about, like I said, are blood sugar, insulin, and then the stress response, because those, like I said, will dictate everything up the chain. And they also are sort of like a vicious cycle for each other. So like if you're in fight or flight, it's really common to see a little hypoglycemia, or when your blood sugar's off, maybe due to lack of movement or excess body weight, or lack of nutrition or whatever, that can also be a stressor on your body and kind of just create this vicious cycle. And so when our brain's always scanning our environment and always deciding, like, can she cope with this? Do we need extra help? Like, what's going on? And it used to be that we were chased by a bear, and that was scary. And then we usually got a complete resolution of that stress cycle, and our adrenaline went, and then your brain realized you were safe. It came down, you got some break from it, and all was well until the next time. Now, I mean, perfectionism, people pleasing, urgency culture, all the stimuli from the internet and just information overload, so much fear around us, the COVID pandemic, like kids and making all the decisions for them. There's just so much on our plate and so much fear, so many things to do, that I think our brains are just constantly in a state of like overwhelm and feeling like, oh my gosh, she needs help coping with this. And so it starts to produce more cortisol and adrenaline to help you as a protective mechanism. But then if you think about the fight or flight response, it takes a lot of energy and resources. Like we can run really fast, we can fight differently than we could normally, we can do all kinds of things. And so to do that, we have to use a lot more blood sugar. We have to use a lot of minerals like magnesium, etc. We have to use, and then your body can decide hormonally what it wants to do. So like progesterone, for example, is progestation. It's this nice, sweet hormone that's produced from ovulation, makes us feel calm. It helps us to manage our stress better. It helps us sleep. It helps to decrease our risk of breast cancer. It helps to lighten our periods up. It does a whole bunch of really beneficial things. But if your brain's like, oh my gosh, we're constantly in stress and we need to save our life right now, it is not going to produce progesterone. It's going to take everything from progesterone and put it to cortisol, because that's the life-saving hormone. And so we sort of have to like recognize in so many of these like hormonal symptoms, like sleep or like insomnia, period issues like PMS stuff, or heavy periods, irregular periods, spotting, energy. I talked about this today, but low energy crashes, highs and lows, like feeling groggy, feeling tired but wired. Those are all signs of cortisol dysregulation. Talking about mood, like if we feel snappy all the time, I always tell my patients this, they're like, I'm just so irritable and like angry and snappy and anxious. And I'm like, okay, if you were in a burning building though, like, would you be patient? Yeah. No, like you're going to be like, let's get out of here and run and grabbing things, and throwing things. And like, that's the messages that we're constantly kind of giving ourselves, maybe not meaning to, well-intentioned, of course, but like, that's how we live our life. We're yelling at the kids to get out the door and grabbing things and throwing things and driving fast and running. And like, those are the messages that we would give ourselves if we were in that burning building. And so mood is not going to be this calm, collected, patient mood. It's going to be like, let's get going. Let's save our own life here.
Yeah, such a great example, because it just makes sense. Like, like, and I know, I mean, I've experienced this plenty of times because I'm very much that perfectionist, people pleaser, stress person for a long time. And it's like, you don't have patience for things, but then cognitively, when you have a moment, you're like, what is wrong with me? Why did I do that? And then you feel guilt and shame, and then it perpetuates the cycle even more. So it's like, when you explain it like that, the burning building, you're like, okay, I see my system, it's a really great way to explain it for people to understand that, like, there's nothing wrong with you. Your system is doing exactly what it's meant to do. And
it's supposed to be doing it.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. I do try to explain it that way, because I think a lot of people, I mean, I could talk about anxiety for days on end, but that too, like your anxiety is a protective mechanism. And so many times we're like, how to get rid of anxiety, whether that is through SSRIs or anti-anxiety stuff, or even through like meditation or nature walking or whatever. And not talking about like what the solution is, but the point is, let's get rid of your anxiety. And your anxiety is your protective mechanism. I always give the example too of like, we want to have anxiety. And sometimes over the course of our life, our brain gets some glitchy thoughts and has a more hypervigilant response to things. But anxiety, like if you're standing on the edge of a cliff, like you want your anxiety to be high, that is saving your life. And so sometimes instead of saying like, I need to just get rid of this anxiety, asking the question of like, why does my brain need to tell me to run or fight or flee or freeze so much? Like, how can we teach our brain that the world's actually safe?
Yeah, 100%. And then that's what I love is like, it's not the symptom management. Now you're getting to the root cause, like, why is this happening? And then we don't want to turn this off. Like that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's like looking at it differently because many people I think would look at like anxiety and be like, I hate my anxious thoughts. I
Yes.
hate this.
I was there
And
too.
yeah, I mean, I was there too. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I can't turn my mind off. But then 100%, the same thing. Like when you ask those questions, you're like, okay, how is this? What is this trying to communicate to me? It flips the script. And it may seem so simple, but those questions make all the difference. They really do, because now it becomes your advocate and you realize that it's here to help you and it wants to tell you something. And if you just suppress it, it's going to find another way to yell at you louder. And you have to start listening to it.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
with the back pain thing, like actually when my back pain went away, that used to be an anchor for the anxiety. And so the
Yeah.
anxiety was through the roof after I got rid of that back pain.
Yeah.
And so I had to like kind of, it was, we call it like symptom imperative. We had to kind of like work through some of that stuff too, and just teaching the brain, like I said, that it was safe. But yeah, I always tell my patients, like, let's kind of just ask the question of like, what messages am I sending my body? Are they messages of safety, like chewing slowly, breathing deeply, thinking clearly, driving the speed limit, like walking at a normal pace, kind of living our life in a more present moment? Or is it like I mentioned, like scarfing our food down and grabbing stuff and running and speeding and yelling and being really chaotic? Like that is going to give your brain the message that like, we need help here.
Yeah.
And these hormones are what's going to be produced. And so it can contribute. I mean, nearly every cell in our body has a cortisol receptor. So it can look like, I mean, hundreds of symptoms. It can look like dizziness and vertigo. It can look like digestive issues and food sensitivities. It can look like chronic pain or tendinitis. It could look like anxiety, OCD, irritability. It can look like blurry vision or like heart palpitations. Like there's so many different areas that it can affect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, that's the important thing too, is like if you're having all these symptoms, it's that it's all connected, it's not like you have this wrong with you and this wrong with you. No, there's something brewing underneath the surface that is coming out in different areas of your life. And that's such a great point. Thank you for sharing that with the cortisol receptors, because that just goes to show like how many, I mean, your whole body is made of cells. And if they have the receptors, it's gonna come up in different areas.
Everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna come up differently for people, and that's the amazing thing about that. For someone else, like, who feels like,
Yeah,
"Okay, oh, I'm sorry."
no, go ahead.
Oh, what are some other ways that we can tell if we have hormonal imbalances? Like, what are other things that may show up in that way?
So, like I said, like anything period related would be likely due to some hormonal component. So you may have like a fibroid cyst, polyp, something like that, but there is still a hormonal component because estrogen is actually what feeds those things. So we want to still look at hormones, even if there is like some structural thing happening. Insomnia, like I said, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping like you feel like you're sleeping with your eyes kind of just closed, but you're wide awake still, really restlessly, anything to do with energy, like I mentioned, like tired but wired, just groggy all day, crashes, highs and lows, any of those types of things. A second wind, a lot of people kind of notice that they're tired all day, and then around like nighttime some point they're like, oh, I'm like ready for the day now, and it's nighttime. Like I said, anything mood related, so anxiety, depression, malaise, irritability, rage, a lot of those things can be due to hormones. And again, I don't mean just like sex hormones. I mean, it does impact sex hormones, but I mean like cortisol, adrenaline, those types of things too. Thyroid stuff is obviously hormonal. Dry skin, like hair loss, acne can be hormonal, hot flashes, night sweats, if you feel cold all the time or hot all the time, weight loss, weight gain, like so many different things that women just assume are like my period isn't my hormones, but they just don't really understand. Like I said, I think a lot of people just don't understand the stress hormone part of things. And I know a lot of people have been told, even through like various symptoms, that it is stress. But like, again, I was told that too, and I had back pain, and it was really disheartening. Like,
Yeah,
I can't move away. Like, I don't know what you want me to do with this stress. And so I always say this to people, it is not your stressors, it's how you're perceiving your life
100%.
that
Yeah,
is the problem.
totally. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've definitely seen as many people I work to that is that stress becomes so normalized
Yeah.
that we think it's like, well, this is how we're supposed to live life. It's just how it is. And then you don't realize that like you don't have to live your life like this. You don't have to have a headache every day. You don't have to have
Okay.
terrible
Yeah.
nights of sleep. Like you don't realize how abnormal you're living and how normalized you've made it until you see the other side and you're like, holy, why did I live my like 10 years like that? You know,
Oh, oh my
that's
God.
the unfortunate thing, I think, especially in this society where, many times if you're a perfectionist, you're praised. If you're a people pleaser, oh, you're looking out for everybody else. That's really great. You're so selfless. Like these things get praised. Oh, you're a go-getter. Oh, you can multitask so well. Oh, you take care of everybody. That's so nice. Like all these things get praised in our society. And then we just, it's like this again, that vicious cycle is like we think that that's what we're supposed to do, and then these symptoms we maybe attribute to other things that are going on in our life. And it's like nothing gets addressed and we just continue really suffering. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to actually mention that. So one of the hardest realizations I think that I had in my own journey with perfectionism and people pleasing was actually wanting to work on that, to be honest. Like I actually didn't want that to go away because I thought that's what kept me motivated and a self-starter and productive and all of those things. And I was like, well, if I'm not a perfectionist, like basically I can like visualize it now, kind of like almost like hitting my own back, like go, go, go.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I don't have that like mean kind of masochistic drive, like what am I going to become? Or
Yeah.
like the people pleasing. I didn't understand this for a long time about people pleasing, but people pleasing has nothing to do with the other person. People pleasing has everything to do with us wanting to avoid anxiety, guilt, or shame. And so I think recognizing the fact that we think that these emotions that we feel are so uncomfortable that we will like do anything in the world to avoid them. And
Yeah.
so I think, you asked me earlier, like part of my own journey was to actually identify and validate like these exact things. And I tell my patients that are people pleasers, like they can kind of laugh at me, but a lot of people pleasers, your audience probably resonates, if you're a people pleaser, like people will ask you like, hey, where do you want to go to lunch? And you're like, oh, I don't care, like wherever, just you pick,
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's like a really benign, like super simple one to just like
Yeah.
take it by the horns and say, I want to go here.
Yeah.
And see, like it's gonna feel so awkward at first, or anxiety is gonna feel so weird. But like that's a really great one to just be like, I'm gonna do this because I want this and this is for me.
Yeah.
But I think we just have to like start basically like exposure therapy. I think same thing for perfectionism. If your house is like a place or dishes in the sink or whatever, like leave a dang dish in the sink and let your anxiety rise and like tell you what a terrible person that is and how uncomfortable that feels. But like normalizing that feeling because it's about the feelings that we're trying to avoid. It has nothing to do with being a perfectionist. Like I read the book, Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, and she was talking about perfectionism in there. And it was like where perfectionism exists, shame is lurking. And it was like just through my own journey, and this took a long time, but recognizing that it actually wasn't about getting things done perfect. It was actually about me wanting to avoid certain feelings of like inadequacy or failure or shame or like those things that just feel catastrophic to so many of us.
Oh my gosh, such a great point. It's like you hit the nail. I feel like you hit the nail on the head because that's literally what it is. It's like, yeah, it's so uncomfortable to feel shameful that you'll literally do anything to avoid that shame. And like I felt the same way. It's like I can't let my foot off the gas pedal even one little bit because everything will spiral. Like I
Yeah.
had everything just so because like if it's not in my control, it's out of control. Like it's that literally all or nothing mindset. And it's like it literally dominates your life in every aspect. And until you really dive into it, it's really scary to let go. It's really scary. And it comes back. I don't know if you notice that too. Like it comes back and then you have to kind of nip in the butt and it comes back again.
And you know
Yeah.
what, it comes back, the interesting, like the hard part of it is it comes back in hard times, like trauma, grief, a lot of pressure, like a lot of external things that are out of your control. I have patients all the time that are like, my life feels really crazy. Like they're going through something that's like a huge thing in their life, caretaking or death or whatever. And they're like, I just need to lose these 5 pounds. I just got to get this weight off. And it's like, it has nothing to do with this weight. It has everything to do with you need to feel control right now. And so let's not worry about the 5 pounds and let's actually lean into the discomfort a bit and recognize that what you're feeling feels too hard to feel.
Yeah.
And it
Oh,
was. And that was literally like the moral of my whole story, with so many of like starting again, like, setting the stage as a child, but also then my dad's death and, so many other things that had happened in my 20s and early 30s. It was just too scary. It hurt too bad to face those things. And so it went to other directions.
yeah.
People with OCD can start to pop up then because those compulsions feel safe. There's so many different areas of it. But I think, if you're listening to this and kind of like, where do I start? Like my first place to start is to actually like pay attention to the thoughts. Like, don't just go on autopilot when you feel the need to like say yes to somebody and like do all this stuff and keep your life really busy. Stop, like literally stop for a second or a few minutes and like, what are the thoughts that your brain is telling yourself? Because those are the keys to what's happening. Our thoughts are directions to your body. And so that was like such an imperative part of my own journey of like, oh, that's how I figured out, like, I don't want to feel guilty for this. So I'm trying to avoid guilt right now.
Yeah.
That's like what it is. It has nothing to do with this other person. It's everything to do with me.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it's such a great point, and it is so easy to just almost like to look outside yourself for reasons for why you're feeling you. It's easier to do that and
Totally.
say like, oh, it's because of this happened and that person said that and I have to do it this way. But it's like diving into yourself and leaning into that discomfort. It's so hard, but it's so worth it because that's the only way you can really move forward. And it's such a great suggestion of where to start. And it's like those constant reminders. Like even if you're pretty far along your journey of healing, it's like those reminders to come back to that. Like I know I need them. Like,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
like yeah, 100%. And you're so right. When those big stressors in our life come, we go back to what's most familiar. And so those familiar mindsets and behaviors start popping up. So it's even more like not giving into it, but rather like acknowledging it and allowing yourself to continue to move forward regardless of that. So such a great suggestion. Just like insight to that because it's so true. And so many of us have experienced that. None of us are unscathed by life. We all experience these things and we all have these things that pop up as far as that. As far as like the hormones and kind of going back into that, if we're experiencing this, say we have something that happened in our life that's been big and we're experiencing, what you describe as the cortisol, increases and we're snappy and everything. Where would you say for someone to start with that so that they can start moving past that and start honoring their needs in that moment?
So I think a few places. I think that if you have gone through like something big, and big is subjective to all of us, whatever that feels like to you. I think the first place that I would suggest starting is truly to like give yourself some space. When we have something big, a lot of us like to just pour into like being really busy and like basically shoving it down or repressing it, which is where a lot of these symptoms begin in the stress response. And so I think to figure out the thoughts so that you don't live in fight or flight and repression and all of that stuff, we have to be able to give ourselves space to figure out what we actually do think. And I think crying and falling apart feels so uncomfortable and nobody wants to do it. We're all trying so hard to hold our tears in, but like crying is one of the most soothing things you can do to your nervous system. It is teaching your nervous system that what you're feeling is safe and okay. And simultaneously, when we're holding those tears back or all these emotions down and the anger, and we're just like, in that repression, like that's teaching our brain, this is too much. We can't handle this. This is too scary. And so that's when it starts to give you all of that stress or all of those stress chemicals. And so I really do think that like, if it's new, first off, like you got to process through it. You got to cry and think and be alone and give yourself space to kind of come down from that. Tell yourself that what you're experiencing is a normal part of the experience. And I think that that's also hard because, like I said, like we were talking about with mom being a mother, there's all kinds of nuanced conversations and feelings around some of these big things that we feel like, oh my gosh, why would I feel that way? This is really bad of me to feel this way. But it's just an innate biological reaction. It's there whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And so I think just like acknowledging it, you can write unsent letters, you can talk out loud, you can obviously go to therapy. Like processing through that is going to be so incredibly helpful at first, initially calming down that stress response. And then I think, all the other things like let's eat our nourishing food, our fruits and vegetables and proteins that will help balance your blood sugar and give your body the nutrients that it needs to support this extra stress. Let's, sleep if we can. Getting sleep will reset your entire nervous system, your blood sugar, produce different antioxidants, detox, like so many great things. I give herbs and supplements sometimes for this, things like magnesium and L-theanine, GABA. There are just certain things that can be really helpful when you're in kind of a state of this. And whether that state is acute for something big happening or a little bit more chronic for just like, this is how you're wired right now, while you're simultaneously doing the work. Like I mentioned, I was in acupuncture school when all of this started. I was at the herbal pharmacy like every day, like, give me more, this isn't working, I need something else. And I've tried to out supplement this. You just can't do it. It just doesn't exist. So I think there are tools that we can use to kind of help people like calm their nervous system down enough to be able to do some of the work. Sometimes when you're just so wound up, it's just really hard to sort of get rid of those catastrophic thoughts or be able to learn to manage them, or the all or nothing thinking or mind reading. And so sometimes I do think that like L-theanine or magnesium or something like that can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's such a good point too, because when you talk about in conjunction with doing the work, and I think that's often the missed point because people think, okay, I'll just take this, I should be better now, but it's really just it's a supplement, exactly what it is. It's to supplement things and help you
Yeah.
along the process. So such a great
Like
thing. And
some tools you can use. I mean, even like SSRIs and stuff, like I think there are some people who just can use them as, like I said, a tool to be able to break in there and do the work. I'm always for improving quality of life. Like that's just a primary value I have in my own business. And I don't think that there should be this war between like pharmaceutical and natural. Like just because it's natural doesn't mean it's better necessarily or safer or anything necessarily. And so I think that they are all tools to improve quality of life if we need to. But I do also know simultaneously that what we're talking about is literally the root and the path forward. It is
yeah,
to
yeah.
healing.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And it is often missed, and people just try to like, oh, I'll take care of the headaches separately. I'll take care of the pain separately. I'll take care of everything separately. And then you're so overwhelmed that you're completely missing the whole big picture, that it's all one thing. And you do this for maybe a year, decades, and you get frustrated and your life hasn't changed and you think you're hopeless, but yet you never really went to where it was. You're not hopeless. It's just you never went into the deeper cause of why this is happening. And that's the most beautiful thing about that. And I would love to hear your perspective on someone who maybe feels that hopelessness, where they feel like this is just how I am, and more that like fixed mindset, like this is how things are. My hormones are out of whack. The doctors have told me like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Like how do you help someone who maybe feels that way kind of transition more into that, like, wow, I can actually get better in life?
I think, I mean, I obviously talk to all my patients about this in some regards, some more than others. I have definitely met people who are very resistant to this and just are very much, I saw it on a blood test, I saw it on an MRI, this is what it is, there's no way forward. And I actually just suggest some of the literature, either like I mean, there's so much now, like even from Oprah just came out with a book that says what happened, or it's called What Happened to You. And there's so many like psychologists talking about how the brain actually works. So I think what a lot of people remember is like stress causes this, or like it's mind body connection was so esoteric even a decade ago. they've been working on this for so many years and several decades, but I just, like I said, I can remember like thinking, I have stress. Like, how could my dad's death be related to this back pain? Like, I don't even know what to do about that. And it just felt so daunting anyways to want to do the work around that. And so I think that truly, I think everybody for themselves has to come to a point where they are willing to do it. Nobody can make anybody do this. And it is hard. It is literally like learning a whole different language. I've been at it for 12 years now, probably. And it's amazing now. Like, I love it. I know myself so well, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. In the beginning few years, like, it was hard, very hard. And so I definitely always give people some sort of literature, whether it's like I mentioned to you before, like the PPD Association, TMS resources, certain like What Happened to You books, or The Body Keeps the Score, because I sort of think that, like, in our sessions, like me just introducing the concept to you, like some people are like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what's going on. Some people need to read an entire book and let themselves process it in real time on their own. And I think my job for a lot of people is to plant the seed, them sort of like think through it for a little bit and then come back, and I can definitely help them get a path forward. But I sort of think that like letting it resonate and sort of sink in a bit on your own, and thinking through your life, right? So thinking through your traumas and your personality and your life in general, and do you have resentment in your relationships, or all of that stuff. Like, I just think, to my point before, we need space to be able to do that. And so I think that just sort of like having some examples and some books of people who have gone through it, seen some like really great testimonials and healing stories, and then letting it marinate a bit is the best way.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how you just described that too, because it really, it's people coming to terms with themselves and bringing awareness to themselves on their own terms. And it's like, you can never force somebody to have awareness of themselves. You can't force them to do something. It has to be something that comes from their heart. So it's so true. And
Family members, a lot of family members that just, I can look at them and be like, you have a lot of trauma.
mhm,
Your illnesses are from this trauma.
yeah,
But they just, some people are too scared to go there, and like that's their thing, and that's okay.
yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah.
remember that it is really heavy to
Yeah.
literally carry that along in your life for decades at a time.
Yeah.
I went through a situation, after my dad's passing, maybe like, I don't know, for a long time, I felt incredibly victimized by it. Like, I was living my life. I was in my 20s. I went to college. I went to school. Got married. I had kids. And I did all those things, and it was fine. But in the backdrop of my brain, that was always a huge thing. Like, it never fully left
Mhm.
until one day I literally was just like, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot feel victimized by this. I can't keep carrying this. And so it was just kind of like, and I had been through some work of this for sure. So it wasn't, without this work, but eventually I was just like, I just have to drop this. It's way too heavy to keep carrying.
Yeah, yeah, that's a thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure someone's listening to this and they're probably going through some things and they're like, I've been living this for 10 years. I don't even know where to begin. And
Yeah.
it's just hopefully bring someone some clarity and peace, and recognizing that no matter where you are in your journey, there's always hope and there's always the ability to change. And it is a process. And even though it may feel uncomfortable, it's worth it. And I'm sure you would say it was worth putting the work in for 12 years, right?
Million percent. And
Yeah.
I love, love, love like hearing people like you talk about it, bring it to light, and guiding people through it. It is, I mean, it's going to sound like super corny, but it is like a beautiful journey.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Through it.
Yeah. And just when you finally say to yourself, you're worth it. I think that's the biggest thing. When you feel in your heart that you're worth more than carrying the shame, the guilt, all those heavy weights or whatever you're feeling, it is so enlightening to feel like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm worth at least doing it. And that's the most beautiful thing. And I believe whoever listens to this, if you're in the place, like there's so many things that you've shared today that I know are going to resonate with people, and they'll just relate to your story, because there's so many things that like are relatable, and that we all go through these struggles, and it's coming to terms with like, when are we ready to take that step forward into the best version of ourselves? And it's
Mhm.
just a beautiful journey.
I know. I was listening to Oprah's book, What Happened to You, over the last like week or so. And it is like, instead of asking like what's wrong with you, it's like, what happened to you? And it was just like such a beautiful book about resiliency and trauma and healing. And every single one of us has stuff. And maybe it's some are worse than others and harder or whatever. But truly, yeah, like I think it is getting to the point where you realize that like your life is worth more than carrying this. And it's not forgetting about the person. It's not getting over it. It's just recognizing that you're worth more than your trauma.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. I'm gonna have to read that book now because I feel like I would love.
So
It's just
good.
sounds great, and Oprah obviously always puts out really good quality
Mhm.
stuff. So that's amazing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, or something that you feel like the audience should really hear, or any messages that you feel called to share right now?
Yeah. I think trying to think like I think with our symptoms, like I said, people think about them as a laundry list. And I have a lot of people that come to me, and you've mentioned this about, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm falling apart and I have this and this and this and this and this. And I just want to encourage you that like you're not falling apart. There's definitely reasons for this. And there's probably one reason for this that's can show up as labs and can show up on imaging. So even if you do have like a diagnosis or something, it doesn't mean that it's not due to nervous system dysregulation. In gut health, like your gut dysbiosis or your inflammation or your food sensitivities or parasites, like when we're in fight or flight, that directs blood and resources and energy away from the GI tract. And so it gives that place the opportunity to start those things. And so like even with so many of these like functional medicine tests, and I do some of them sometimes, so I'm not completely bashing them. It's not an all or nothing thing, but we we can't just do like detox protocols and food sensitivity tests and elimination diets for like our entire life. We got to figure out, why did this begin? If you weren't born with like a dairy allergy or something, like, and you just developed it, why did it begin? Why did this start? We got to sort of like look and pull back the curtain a bit on like a few weeks, months, years before to forward. Is there anticipatory anxiety, things like that? And let's actually look at what's going on here.
Yeah, such a huge point. Like literally, if you're listening, rewind that and listen to that again, because that's it. It's not a one size fits all. This is not like this whatever works for everybody. And it is really the introspection, looking into ourselves and understanding why we're experiencing this, and that living sick, living unwell is not normal. We're not meant to go through our life feeling like we're just trying to survive. So that's such a huge point. And just, thanks for sharing too about like, the understanding the test, because many times I know I've worked with people too. It's like they get these tests back and it's like, again, they take the information as what's wrong with me, and then don't know what to do with it. Don't know
Yeah.
how to even change their life, or they do something and it doesn't work because again, you're missing the big point of
Mhm.
why did this start?
Creates so much more
Yeah.
fear, so much more
Yeah.
hopelessness. Like it really perpetuates the whole thing. And then we become obsessive about the symptoms and the sensations. And it truly is just like such a big vicious cycle. I've started to talk about that a lot more on my own platforms, but um, it's well-intentioned people. It's how we've been trained. It's
Right.
nothing like bad about a lot of other practitioners, but there is just this area that's people are talking about, like, well, manage your stress. Like I always see it as like a bullet point on things like do this, manage your stress. And it's like that's like the biggest one. And also we don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Like we've been taught to manage our stress actually, besides like do some meditation, which a lot of people in our personality can't even do
No,
meditation.
it's just a quiet space. It's a quote quiet
Like,
space where you think
oh,
more negative thoughts when you start.
what
Yes.
am I doing? I'm not doing this right. Oh my gosh, I'm not feeling calm.
100%. I tried to do it for years until I actually like got myself into a place where I could. So it's so
Right.
true. And then again, it perpetuates that cycle of like, what's wrong with me? If I can't manage my stress, now I'm hopeless because
Yeah.
stress doesn't stop. So what am I supposed to do?
I'm feeling stress.
Yeah.
It's happening all my symptoms.
Yeah.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my gosh, 100%. I feel like we could go on forever with this because there's so many dynamics to this, and it's such a huge thing, especially today where we're all experiencing stress. We're all experiencing a lot of things in our life. I know, and this could be literally a whole nother episode. I would have loved to ask you, but like infertility is a big one. Like infertility with people, periods, birth control. I mean, literally, I love to have you back on and talk about all this
Oh,
because
yeah.
that is huge. And again, no one's talking about why is this occurring more? Why are we dealing with this? Like, there's so many things that, especially as women, we're dealing with and trying to manage and be working mom, actually be moms and just take care of ourselves and honor our needs. I mean, it can feel very overwhelming. So when you're experiencing physical symptoms, it just can feel like I don't even know where to begin with this. So I hope for anyone who listens to this, and this is the biggest gift about podcasts, because I know someone's going to hear this and be like, oh my gosh, like that's me. Like I never ever looked at why I'm experiencing this. And, especially when you share like your back pain and the things you've been through and the root cause of all the mindset and these beliefs that you've carried your whole life. It's so real. And I've had that in my own life. I know many, many people have had, I mean, so many people, like that's it. Like, there's a root cause to everything you're experiencing.
And
So
it's like truly so much, once you learn this, it's so much by design, by like how our brain works. Like
mhm,
I've been on this journey for 10 years or 12 years or whatever to like learn how the brain works. And it's
yeah,
not surprising. It's not uncommon. It's not weird. So many people come to me and they're like, oh my God, I'm having this like really weird thought. And I'm like, nope, that's like exactly what your brain's
yeah,
supposed to be right now. Like that's just
great.
part of the whole process, I guess, of like what you're going through. And like, it's none of it's really weird. It's just like, oh yeah, of course that's what your brain's giving you right now.
Yeah. And the more you understand, the more you realize that it's doing exactly what it's a healthy brain. It's doing exactly what it should. It takes off that like, oh, okay, good. All right. That's literally the power of knowledge. And it all starts from a thought. And then now your emotions change because your thoughts have changed. And then now your body starts changing. And it's this whole beautiful
Mhm.
cycle that actually works for you than against you, and which we all tend to get stuck in at some point in our life. So for someone who's hearing this and wants to connect with you and dive further, how can they find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything online is Ali Damron. So I have a podcast called The Ali Damron Show where we talk about these very same topics. I have an Instagram at Ali Damron where I share stuff every day. I have a training, How to Balance Your Hormones for Better Energy, Mood, Sleep, and Periods, where you can go to alidamron.com/training. And I talk a lot more about specifically hormones, like why so many people are struggling with this, why your friends are talking about this, why your labs are normal, all of that stuff. And so you can get way more information specifically about the hormone side of things and like physical symptoms to get yourself feeling better. Because it is, like, to your point, such a huge burden to not feel good. We already got enough going on. Not feeling well just really adds to it.
Yeah, 100%. And give yourself that gift. You deserve it. For anyone who's listening, you deserve it and you deserve to start it today. Like you deserve to start it right now. Like don't wait till the time is quote perfect. There's never a perfect time. Like do it today, do it now, do the smallest step forward to change your life. You'll be grateful you did 5 years from now. So it's huge. Thank you so much, Ali. Like I said, this has just been such an awesome conversation. I know it's going to help so many people, and that's really the purpose of it. So thank you for sharing everything you did today.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And again, for everyone listening, connect with Ali, follow her, and really check out everything she has. I love your content, so I know everyone else will. So definitely connect to Ali. And again, thank you for everyone who's kind of followed us in this episode. And please share your thoughts and share it with a friend. Don't save this for yourself. Share it to someone who else could benefit from it, and really serve someone else today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.